Hello and welcome back everyone to another short video in our Year 6 revision series. So today we're going to be looking at two different punctuation marks, which is the semicolon and the colon. And these are great for making our writing clearer, more sophisticated, and they do often appear in the SATS GPS paper. So what we're going to do, we're going to break them down and go through how we use them. So we're going to start with semicolons. Now, semicolons, they look like this. And a good way to remember the difference between a semicolon and a colon is that a semicolon is that it's stronger than a comma, but it's maybe not as strong as a full stop. It's somewhere in between. Now, we use semicolons to join two main clauses. And you might be thinking, well, we already have something that does that because our coordinating conjunctions do that for us. However, it replaces a coordinating conjunction. However, what we do need to remember is that these two main clauses have to be closely related or linked in some way. So let's do an example. So, if I look at this sentence now, I've got two main clauses. Now, a main clause or an independent clause is something that would make sense on its own. Okay, so if I look at these two, we've got it was raining heavily, which yes, absolutely makes sense. I've got my subject and my verb. And then I've got we stayed inside. Now, both of these are complete sentences, and I have to use something. So I need to use either a piece of punctuation or I'd need to use some kind of conjunction to link these two separate ideas together. Now, because they are closely linked, I'm talking about the fact that it was raining heavily, and because of that, we stayed inside. So I could use a conjunction like and or but this time I'm going to use a semicolon. And I'm going to put it in between my two main clauses. Let's have a look at this next one. The sun was setting. The sky turned a beautiful shade of orange. Why don't you try and include the semicolon where you think it would go? Pause the video and have a go. So, the way to approach this one is thinking, what are my two main clauses? What are the two parts of the sentence that make sense on their own? So I've got the sun was setting. Now I've got a subject and a verb there, and I could put a full stop if I wanted to, so that tells me it's a main clause. Then I've got the sky turned a beautiful shade of orange. Again, I've got my verb and I've got my subject, and I've got my full stop at the end. Now these two sentences are linked, so in between them what I can do is include a semicolon. Because I'm still talking about the sky. I'm talking about the fact that the sun was setting, and because it was setting, it had turned a beautiful shade of orange. If I didn't want to use a semicolon, I could use a coordinating conjunction such as and that would make perfect sense. But in this case, I've chosen to use a semicolon. Okay, this time I want you to have a look at this sentence. I was really tired because I didn't sleep well. Pause the video for a second. Can you think why this is an incorrect use of a semicolon? So, in this case, the semicolon wouldn't work because remember what we said before, a semicolon's used to link two main clauses together. Now, because we've used a subordinating conjunction of because, we don't need a semicolon. We could just leave that sentence as it is. I was really tired because I didn't sleep well. Semicolons only link the two main clauses, but because I've used a subordinating conjunction, that's saying that the following clause that I'm about to put is reliant on the first part. So I'm saying that to fully understand why I was really tired, we have to know that it's because I didn't sleep very well. So you wouldn't be able to use a semicolon in that case. So, to sum up that little bit, semicolons are used to join two main clauses together, but those two main clauses have to be closely related. We also don't use semicolons with conjunctions. If anything, they replace a conjunction or they replace a full stop. Now, it can be really easy to keep throwing in semicolons everywhere, but sometimes a conjunction is just better. So you've got to see what fits the best. Okay, so let's do a little bit of work on colons now. Now, colons have two main purposes. They provide some kind of explanation to something, or they can introduce a list. Okay, so let's have a look at an example of how it can be used before an explanation. Now, it's quite easy to mix these up with semicolons, so really try and listen carefully here at the difference between the two, because it is only small. So here you've got she was late. The bus driver had broken down. Now, from what we've just done, these both look like independent clauses or main clauses, don't they? She was late, the bus had broken down. However, the way that it's different is they're not just closely related, they directly explain one another. I'm saying that she was late, and now I'm going to use a colon, I'm going to put that in to explain to you why she is late. I'm directly telling you why she was late. I'm telling you that the bus had broken down. The other differences with colons is that it doesn't always have to be two main clauses. So let me give you another example. Now, this is going to be another example. So I've got, he only had one goal, to win the championship. Can you think there of where a colon might be used to help explain something? Pause the video if you want and have a think. Hopefully you identified that it would go here. Now the reasoning behind this is because I'm explaining what that one goal was. I've told you that he's got one, now I'm using a colon to tell you what the goal is. I'm giving you that information. Now if you look at these separately, he only had one goal. That is definitely a main clause or an independent clause. It makes sense on its own. To win the championship, however, that doesn't make sense on its own. So when we use colons, it is to explain something, and it doesn't necessarily have to be two main clauses like the first example that I told you. So this next one, it works in quite a similar way. So this is before introducing some kind of list. So for example, you need three things, colon, a pen, paper, and a ruler. So again, these colons being used here to introduce something. I've told you need three things, that's my main clause, but now I'm going to tell you those things that you need. So it works in a very similar way to providing that explanation that we did before. Now let's have a look at a bit of a misconception when it comes to using a colon in a list. So for example, my favourite colours are blue, green and red. Well, from what I've just said, that is introducing a list. However, what we don't do is use a colon after a verb that then introduces a list, because we don't need one. That would just be a normal list. So my favourite colours are blue, green and red. There's no need for a colon there. Your colon would need to come after a main clause. So this is an incorrect use of a colon. But what we could do is move this sentence around a little bit so it is a main clause. So for example, I could say, I have three favourite colours. Then I could use my colon because I'm going to tell you what those three colours are. Blue, green, and red. Now that would be the correct use of a colon. Why don't you have a look at this one now? See where the colon would go. There is one thing I love about weekends, sleeping in. Hopefully, you realise that the colon would come at the end here. Now, let's check. So I've got, there is one thing I love about weekends. That's a main clause and it does make sense on its own. But I'm going to tell you what my favourite thing or the thing I love about weekends is, and it's sleeping in. So I'm providing an explanation. I'm telling you what my favourite thing is, the thing I love the most about weekends. Now, again, that bit at the end, that's not a main clause. It doesn't work on its own. So I needed something to connect those two ideas. I couldn't just leave it as it is. Why don't we work together now to have a look at how this might be used in a SATs question? So, this is the question. This is from a real paper. It says, insert a colon in the correct place in the sentence below. Many fossils are not as big as people think. Some are so small that you'll need a microscope to see them. Pause the video and have a go. Hopefully you identified that it was here. So many fossils are not as big as people think. Some are so small that you need a microscope to see them. Let's have a go of another. This question is asking you which one uses the colon correctly. Read through, have a think. Hopefully you identified it was this fourth one. I bought several beach toys, a bucket, a spade, a ball and a kite. Here the colon is being used to introduce a list. I'm listing the things that I'm taking to the beach, or the things that I bought for the beach. Why don't you pause the video and have a go of this one on your own? Hopefully you identified that the semicolon will go here to separate two main clauses, but they are linked. Come and see me tomorrow, I will not have time to see you today. And for the last one, why don't you look at this one? Pause it and have a go. Okay, so this sentence, it was raining heavily, she had lost her umbrella the week before. You should have put it after heavily. So it was raining heavily, makes sense on its own. She had lost her umbrella the week before. Two main clauses, but they are closely linked. And that brings our video to the end. So hopefully now you have a better understanding about how and when to use semicolons and colons in your writing. If you're still not sure, why don't you watch the video again and have another go.